Korea's gender war is out of control. Just look at their politics. In the June 2025 presidential election, roughly 3 in 4 young men voted conservative. About 3 in 5 young women voted progressive. That's nearly a 40-point gap, likely one of the widest gender voting splits on record. And this isn't just Korea. In the US, a 30-point gap opened up in 6 years. Same for Germany and the UK. But Korea is where it went furthest, and the pattern is everywhere. By the end of this video, you'll see exactly why Korea is a preview of what's coming for the West. They call it suk-yeol 전쟁, the gender war.
But winter is coming.
I spent months digging into Korean government data, national surveys, and thousands of posts across Korean forums and social media. In the next few minutes, I'll explain why both sides think they're the ones getting punished. And there's one country with the exact same economics with no gender war at all. Let me show you how bad things have gotten. Korean marriages dropped by half in under 30 years, from about 435,000 couples in 1996 to around 220,000 in 2024. An average first marriage age jumped several years in a single generation, so women now marry around 34, men around 32. And Korea's total fertility rate hit 0.72 in 2023, less than 1 child per woman, and the lowest on the planet. And if you're thinking, well, maybe they're just having kids without getting married. Nope. Fewer than 1 in 20 Korean babies are born outside marriage, the lowest in the OECD by far. So when marriages collapse, births collapse with them. One reason people aren't getting married is because of the ongoing gender war. About 3 in 5 Koreans say that the gender conflict is serious. Among 18 to 29-year-olds, that rises to 3 in 4, the highest rate of any country surveyed, 25 points above the global average. Men point to mandatory military service, a brutal job market, and a housing system that expects them to front deposits most of them will never afford. Women point to the worst earnings gap in a developed world, careers that flatline the moment they have a child, and a digital environment where deepfake porn of classmates get treated like a joke. Both sides have the data, and I'll get into all of that. But let's start at the story's beginning, because the resentment didn't start with economics, it started on Korea's 4chan. This gender war story escalated over 15 years, and it helps to see the full timeline because both sides were responding to the same broken system, just from opposite ends. And the politician who rode this anger to the presidency, he's now serving a life sentence. I'll get to that. It started with a forum called Ilbe around 2010. Think of it like Korea's version of early 4chan, a place for young men to vent about losing 2 years of their prime to mandatory military service while the job market got worse. And the economic pain was real. Korean men died by suicide at more than double the rate of women, over 10,000 men in 2024 alone. I talk in depth about Korea's crazy suicide rate here, so check it out if you're interested. Another major grievance is about 7 in 10 men call mandatory service unfair, because the hit is estimated to be up to 1/10 of their lifetime income. And the employment situation is rough too, with fewer than half of young Koreans having jobs. On top of that, Korea just expanded its foreign worker quota close to 200,000, concentrated in sectors young men typically enter post-military. From the men's perspective, cheap migrant labor adds insult to injury for their post-military sacrifice. Just look at some of the comments pulled here. So inside the forum, some of that resentment turned deeply toxic. But for a few years, it was mostly contained to the message boards. And then, women built a weapon specifically designed to enrage every man on those forums. In 2015, a counter forum called Megalia decided to poke the bear. They emerged as the radical feminist counter, driving a tactic called mirroring, taking the same language men were using on Ilbe and flipping the genders right back at them as deliberate provocation. In May 2016, a man murdered a woman near Gangnam Station, exit 10. He told police he did it out of deep hatred towards women. He hid in a public bathroom, let 6 men walk by, and waited for the first woman who entered. And this led to mass feminist mobilization like vigils and protests. And the digital war just kept escalating. But the Gangnam murder was one man. What came next was systemic. In 2018 came the Mocha epidemic, which stood for More Camera, literally secret camera. Tiny hidden cameras planted in public toilets, changing rooms, and motels. And there was no criminal syndicate behind it. The cameras were planted by ordinary men, like motel owners, store clerks, ex-boyfriends who uploaded the footage. For years, police dragged their feet. They claimed that the servers were too hard to track, and they told victims that they were overreacting. And because the penalties were light, most men just paid a small fine and walked. Police treated spy cam reports like annoying paperwork. Morka felt like a traffic ticket. Then, in May 2018, a woman did a reverse gender mocha and secretly filmed a male nude model and posted the photo online. Suddenly, the system worked. Police tracked her down, arrested her in days, and paraded her in front of the media. The system moved at light speed to protect a male victim. The hypocrisy broke the dam. Tens of thousands of women flooded Haehwa Station in some of the biggest women-only protests Korea had ever seen. Their signs read, "My life is not your porn." It makes zero sense to date a man when there was a chance he was trading secret videos of you online. Then came the nth room scandal. Over 250,000 accounts accessed chat rooms where women and underage girls were being extorted, tortured, and sexually exploited. Premium access was sold for cryptocurrency. And by 2024, the deepfake porn crisis exploded. AI-generated fake porn of classmates, teachers, female soldiers, mostly made by teenage boys. Over 3,000 digital sex crime cases in a single year. 9 out of 10 victims are teenagers or young women. At every juncture, Korean feminists pushed back, and some of the activism made progress. Soranet, a major revenge porn site, got shut down. Spycam enforcement expanded, and deepfakes were criminalized in September 2024. And a National Center for Digital Sexual Crime Response launched in April 2025. But none of it cooled the war, because both sides were responding to the same broken system, and neither could see the other's pain clearly. Data backs this up. Polling shows a majority of young Korean men describe themselves as anti-losing, not anti-women. They lose 2 years to mandatory service. They return to a job market that got worse while they were gone. They face a housing system that expects them to front massive deposits. And they face a public conversation that frames their structural pain as privilege.
I feel like I'm stuck with no way out. I think the biggest problem is that there are not enough jobs compared to the number of job seekers.
Many men still felt they were trying to uphold their end of the Confucian bargain. He provides, and she manages the home. But many feel that women were no longer playing by the same rules.
Those are rules. I don't even think we're still supposed to be friends.
Korean women in the 4B movement describe opting out of dating, marriage, and childbirth as a structural response. The trap being career cliffs, the second shift, and housing costs that require a partner to clear. More women than men hold degrees now. More than 3 in 4 women versus about 3 in 5 in men. A reversal from barely 20 years ago. Despite the credentials, the earnings gap didn't reverse. Korean women face over 3 times the housework as men, a career cliff the moment they have a child, and the constant statistical threat of going viral on deepfake revenge tube. Trusting a partner had become a massive gamble. Go on any Reddit or Korean forum right now, and you can scroll through thousands of women saying the exact same thing. They're not getting married. They're just going to travel and build their careers. When everyone's got proof that they're getting cheated, compromise starts to feel like surrender. Both sides showed their receipts, and both sets are real. But politicians looked at this firestorm and saw opportunity. Angry young men were a highly motivated voting bloc. They just needed a champion. In 2022, Suk-yeol gave them that champion. Think of him like Korea's Trump, a political outsider who built his base on young male grievance. He ran for president on an explicitly anti-feminist platform. He went on record stating that structural gender discrimination no longer exists in South Korea. His flagship promise was abolishing the Ministry of Gender Equality entirely because it's no longer needed. And it worked. He captured nearly 3 in 5 young male voters and won by the narrowest margin in Korean history. He corralled the male anger and locked the divide straight into government policy. But the whiplash was brutal, because in December 2024, the man young Korean men elected as their champion did something no Korean president had ever done in over 40 years. He declared martial law over what he called an opposition threat to national security. The National Assembly overturned it in 6 hours. On December 14, he was impeached, 204 to 85. Even members of his own party voted to remove him. The Constitutional Court upheld it in April 2025, and on February 19, 2026, he got a life sentence for insurrection. His defense minister got 30 years. But the snap election that followed told the real story.
아니 진짜
The progressive Lee Jae-myung won by a margin of roughly 8 points overall, but the gender divide inside the youth vote was closer to 40 points. Let's just look at the two sides. The conservative coalition says abolish the gender ministry, prioritize merit, and fix the economy. The progressive coalition says expand parental leave, build housing, strengthen protections, and more foreign workers to prop up the economy. Both platforms respond to real structural problems experienced by their voters. Lee won partly because the conservative vote split. The young men were divided between a mainstream conservative and a harder right reform candidate, not because they changed their minds. In a moment politicians turned that rage into votes, attitudes hardened in both directions, and we could see it in the surveys. Men as breadwinners jumped from about 1 in 5 to 1 in 3 in a single year. Women should do housework, more than doubled, from 1 in 8 to 1 in 4. Every major policy Korea needs to address, from housing, defense, immigration, demographics, runs into the gender war before it even gets a hearing. So now you've seen the war. Both sides' pain is real and the politics locked it in. But the war runs on fuel, and that fuel is economics, starting with the one thing that broke the first promise of partnership. Korea has a rental system called the chonse. Instead of paying monthly rent, you hand the landlord a massive lump sum deposit, 50 to 80% of the apartment's market value. The landlord invests that money, earns the interest, and returns the deposit when you leave. It's essentially an interest-free loan from you to your landlord for 2 years. The average Seoul apartment chonse deposit now runs around 670 million won, roughly $480,000 USD. That's just to rent. A young Korean worker earning around $30,000 a year would need over a decade of entire pre-tax salary just for the deposit. Buying is even more out of reach. And the system is riddled with fraud. Over 11,000 confirmed cases in a single year. Over 30,000 victims. Basically, you hand the landlord almost $500,000. They promise to give every won back in 2 years. But many are already in deep debt. Pay their own bills, buy more apartments, YOLO into the stock market, or meme coins. Some rent the same apartment to multiple people at once and then ghost. And developers do the same thing with pre-construction buildings. They collect deposits for apartments that aren't even built yet, and then the project fails and they disappear with the money. And when your 2 years are up, your life savings have evaporated. When it comes to gender, the chonse deposit is still the man's responsibility. That cultural expectation never got updated. You come out of the military, you start earning, and you do the math. A decade of your entire salary just to rent a place. So dating goes beyond romance. It's a financial stress test. You know it, and so does she. And since employment is rough and pay is low, About 1 in 20 young adults between 19 and 34 live in goshwon, tiny rooms with shared bathrooms, barely big enough for a bed and a desk. We're talking working adults, men and women with college degrees and office jobs, living in boxes because the alternative costs $500,000. You go to work in a suit, and you come home to a room where you can touch both walls with your arms stretched out. But housing traps women differently. She'll chip in, but the deposit stays in his name. So if the marriage fails, that money's gone. In practice, many women end up at their parents' house or in a tiny room. So a lot of women stay in marriages they're unhappy in because leaving means financial disaster. He can't form a household on a single income at sole prices. She can't exit a bad marriage without losing housing stability. But housing isn't the only trap. There's one built in the Korean language itself, and it quietly kills women's career before they even get to a decision about having kids. Korea's age hierarchy is ruthless, and its honorifics lock it in place. You can't avoid it. Every relationship in Korea has its own language, based on age. When I was a teacher there, orientation taught us that when new Korean students enter a classroom, the first thing they figure out is everyone's age, because they need to know what honorific to use. A workplace is no different. A younger male boss can't comfortably call an older female colleague Nuna. It sounds like a little brother asking for an allowance. But barking Kim Dae-nim, which stands for Assistant Manager Kim, at a woman who used to help him with his spreadsheets, that feels stiff and unnatural. And if you're not Korean, this probably sounds like a minor social headache. But it's not. In Korean workplaces, the wrong honorific in the wrong meeting can tank a promotion decision. This single linguistic trap quietly pushes women out of the promotion track in their mid-30s. And the economics make sure they arrive at that cliff right on schedule. Raising a child in Korea costs about 1.1 million won per month, over $800, covering daycare, food, clothing, and education. Even before factoring subsidies, that pushes child-rearing costs close to nearly a fifth of typical household income. Nearly all fathers keep working after having a kid. In comparison, only about 2 in 3 mothers do. The Korea Development Institute found mothers face nearly a 45-point employment drop in the decade after childbirth. If you saw my Japan video here, you know about the M-shaped career curve. Women's employment drops at childbirth, then partially recovers. Korea's version is closer to her taking an L. She drops off, and the Nuna trap makes sure she never comes back. And career cliffs is where the 31% wage gap actually comes from. It's structural, and is not a paycheck-by-paycheck issue. A woman often drops to part-time to manage childcare. It's a rational family decision. She already earns less, so her income barely covers daycare anyway. But it's not just the kids. In Korea, the heavy burden of caring for aging parents and in-laws still falls overwhelmingly on women. More than 6 in 10 informal elder care duties land on daughters and daughters-in-law. So she's raising the next generation while also looking after the previous one, and her husband just keeps climbing. Say she tries to come back in her mid-40s. She walks into a second trap, and this one has a name. In Korean, she's an ajumma. If you watch K-dramas, you'll understand the connotations of that title. Now she's clearly older than her bosses, and they treat her like an office auntie. Polite on the outside, but promotions and real responsibilities go elsewhere. She handles the emotional labor and the quiet tasks while the young guys climb. And 20 years later, she has 12 years of seniority. He has 20, and it's a completely different trajectory. Surveys say about 2 in 5 women who leave the workforce after childbirth cite child rearing as the reason. But when daycare costs more than your post-cliff salary, preference is just math. The government knows this, so they've spent over $250 billion since 2006 trying to fix it. That's more than New Zealand's entire GDP spent on getting people to have babies. And look at the result. They tried cash bonuses for having kids, childcare subsidies, and parental leave expansion. And to be fair, about 1 in 3 fathers now take paternity leave, a record high. But look at the actual result. The fertility rate hit 0.72 in 2023. Late 2025 data puts it on track for roughly 0.85, which would be the fastest rise in 18 years. Well, let's put 0.85 in perspective. The replacement rate to keep a stable population is 2.1. And the US is panicking over a birth rate of 1.6. Japan is calling their demographic collapse a national emergency at 1.15. Cash can't fix a structural trap, and it's deeper than Korea. Research found that when women enter an occupation in large numbers, wages drop for everyone in it. Men's wages fall about 8%, and women's fall even further. 2 incomes become necessary precisely because 2 incomes became normal. The floor moved. So when you hear about Korea's 4B movement, 비연애, no dating, 비섹스, no sex, 비혼, no marriage, 비초선, no childbirth, understand what it actually is. This is the nuclear option. Women looked at the gender war, the housing trap, the motherhood cliff, ran the numbers, and said, hard pass. They're not just opting out of marriage. They're opting out of the entire script that says their body, their career, and their unpaid labor are national resources to be managed with cash and guilt trips. And the moment they started walking away, a lot of men responded with pure rage. You're the problem. The gender war went from cold resentment to mutually assured destruction in the marriage market. However, the survey data tells a different story from the loudest voices online. A 2025 government survey found that nearly 3 in 5 unmarried women aged 25 to 49 actually intend to marry, up almost 10 points from the year before. 4B is the loudest response in the flame wars on forums like DC Inside and The Q, but it's fringe, and frankly, it's sensationalism for the Western audience. When housing costs a decade of your salary, childcare consumes a fifth of your income, and having a child permanently damages your career, opting out of a partnership is the rational move, but Korea isn't alone in this trap. Every major economy in East Asia is running the same experiment. The difference is what happens when the results come in. These countries share sky-high housing, brutal work culture, and births in freefall. But the pressure produces 3 completely different responses. Japan is the clearest comparison. On paper, the economics look identical. TFR at 1.15, crisis level anywhere else, but still 60% higher than Korea's. Same overwork culture, same unaffordable cities. But the hardware is different. Japan had over a century to modernize, starting with the Meiji Restoration. Korea crammed the same transformation into 40 years. Imagine running a century of social change and fast forward. Japan also has no mandatory military service, carving prime earning years out of men. And it also has a deep cultural tilt towards harmony over open confrontation. So the pressure instead turns inward. Japanese men pioneered the herbivore status and hikikomori, quietly stepping off the provider treadmill. Women do something parallel, staying parasite single, living with parents into their 30s and 40s, prioritizing freedom over marriage. Roughly half of men in 18 to 39 are single. 4 in 10 women the same age are too. And Dr. Haruka Sakamoto, who co-authored the first nationally representative study of herbivore men, put it bluntly. The phenomenon is partly driven by socio-economic adversity. Men without stable jobs simply don't enter the dating market. It's mutual resignation, not mutual hatred. There's no 4B declarations, no deepfake arms races, no politicians driving the gender wedge. And in February 2026, one party locked in 316 seats, the largest single-party majority in post-war history. That's what sovereign policy looks like when young men and women aren't voting in parallel universes. And I'll talk more about it here. Korea's version of the same economic pain went public instead of turning inward. And when AFP journalist Ha-won Jung surveyed single Korean men about what women should fix to be suitable marriage material, their number one answer was feminism. China is the other comparison I want to talk about. New marriages collapsed from over 13 million to just 6 million in a single decade. The pressure to marry came from everywhere. Social media, parents' matchmaking campaigns, all pushing the shengnu label, which stands for leftover women. But Chinese women responded with quiet refusal. They just stopped showing up for the old script. And because China's internet is tightly managed, the conflict plays out differently. Quieter, more individual, less collective. The same gender tensions exist, they just don't escalate the way they do in Korea. So the economics are identical, and the outcome is completely different. And the reason comes down to 4 variables. Japan's pressure turns inward, quiet resignation. China's stay private, individual refusal. Korea's explodes outward, open political warfare. And the reason is a specific cocktail. Compressed modernity, a military service asymmetry that feels like a tax on young men, an unregulated internet where resentment compounds in real time, and open democratic competition that rewards politicians who pick a side. That formula isn't unique to Korea anymore. The exact gender divergence, men shifting conservative, women progressive, cracked open in the US with 30-point gaps in 6 years. The same trends are happening in Germany and the UK. And the online escalation from venting to repeal the 19th follows the Irbe to Megalia playbook almost beat for beat. Korea didn't invent the incentives that made partnership losing a bet. It just combined them with the accelerants that turned resentment into a war first. Asia is running parallel versions of the exact same simulation, and the West is queued up right behind them. At the top of the video, I said both sides think they're losing, and they're both right. Both sides are losing ground against the same structural forces: housing costs, career cliffs, military service gaps, and a political system that runs on conflict rather than resolving it. A generation of men raised to be breadwinners can't rent an apartment on one's salary, and a generation of women told education would set them free discovered a master's degree doesn't protect them from a career cliff the moment they have a child. Korea hit every accelerant at once and built a system that rewards picking a side. The US, Germany, and the UK are stacking the same ingredients right now. The data is clear about what's broken. Nobody's figured out how to fix the structure, and the gap between men and women who think they're getting cheated is widening everywhere. If you've lived in Korea or you're watching the same fault lines crack open where you're at, I'm genuinely curious what you think actually moves this. Let me know in the comments. If you like this video, you'll like this one. And if you made it this far, don't forget to like and sub.